Nordstrom. Here. Roberts. Here. Clayton. Here. Lorente. Here. We have quorum.
Thank you. You're invited to join us in an invocation. You are welcome to participate, but not required. We'll have Pastor Julie Norwood from the Church of God. Please stand.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the day that you have created, Lord God. Help us just to remain faithful, to rejoice and be glad in it. Father, I thank you for those public servants that have entered into this room tonight, Father, to conduct the business of our fine city. Lord, I pray that you would lead them and guide them into your will and your truth and your timing for the people that live here, Father, and call this place home. We ask, Father, that you would bless those that reside here, Father, from the east and the north, the south and the west. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Please join us in pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do you have a motion to adopt the agenda as published?
So moved.
Any discussion? Yes. Steve? Oh, okay. Go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to suggest that item 167, which is the statement from the mayor, be moved up to the front of the agenda just so that people who are here don't have to wait 2 hours to figure out where you might be.
It's fine. Any objection to that? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, the agenda is addended to that, and it'll be the first item. Any other changes? Not, is there a motion to approve the agenda as adopted? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. Item 167, the mayor is at the Chamber of Commerce retreat, I believe in Valentine, Nebraska, and they're all getting inspired onto how to lead us into a greater future and what time well spent. So we're here to back them up. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, any comments, questions? Those in favor say aye. Thank you. Our awards and recognitions. Our first one is this evening to a friend of mine and a friend of many of us is Mr. Babe Steinberg, Citizen of the Month. Would you join us up front, please? And I'd like to have the members of the Ward 2 delegation be down front with me, please. Babe?
Come on, George and Lisa. You're not going to let him go up there by himself now, are you?
Surprise, Babe.
Surprise, yeah.
Kind of like those 3 a.m. alarms, right?
Yeah.
Well, I've got it. Babe and I have known each other a long time. Distinguished service member with the fire department of Rapid City. How many years?
Well, it's 28 at the fire hall and 24 on city council.
That's a good man. We'll open with a reading of the Citizen of the Month nomination with Richie.
No,
Okay.
Forgive me for any mistakes I make. Citizen of the Month, May 2014, City of Rapid City. Vess, Babe Steinberg, was born in Rapid City to George and Blanche Steinberg on May 7th, 1925. Babe spent his first 12 years with his family in Wasta, where his father was sheriff. Babe often tells the story of the time he helped get some prisoners free by sawing them out of an old wooden jail cell after they had given Babe candy and befriended him. His father had to recapture the prisoners, and needless to say, was not happy with Babe. His family moved back to Rapid City, where Babe graduated from Central High School in 1943. Babe served in World War II from 1943 to 1946 and spent his time in the Pacific. He was in the Navy, but his ship developed a hole. So they got the crew off the boat and made them all Marines. The day before, he was only 40 miles from the bombing of Iwo Jima. After the war, when Babe was headed home from his time in the service, the first song he heard on the radio was the Wabash Cannonball, which is one of his favorite songs still today. Upon returning to Rapid City, Babe married his sweetheart, Darlene Whiff. They have 2 children, a son and daughter, a granddaughter, and 2 great-grandsons who call Babe Grandpa Great. I think they got that right. Babe and Darlene shared a full life and over 50 years together before his Darlene's passing.
Babe worked for the Rapid City Fire Department for 25 years from 1948 until he retired in 1973. During his time as assistant fire chief, 3 great firemen were lost in the historic flood of 1972. Babe served 24 years on the Rapid City Common Council from 1977 to 2002. He was council president for 2 years and council vice president for 3 years. Yeah. He worked with 5 mayors. You survived all 5 of them. Served on several committees, including the Rushmore Plaza Civic Center and Rapid City Regional Airport. Babe has spent over half of his life serving the citizens of Rapid City. Babe still keeps informed on city issues, plus he thoroughly enjoys visits with the Mayor Quaker and other current and former city officials and employees. We thank you for all of that you have done for Rapid City and its citizens. You are most deserving of May's Citizen of the Month. Congratulations. Oh, and by the way, happy 89th birthday. 89th. Yes. Yesterday, I had the opportunity of meeting Babe at one of the local convenience stores, and it was so hard not to spill the beans to you yesterday. So, yes, we did. This was a total surprise for Babe, so if you have got a couple words, here's your opportunity.
Well, I sure was real happy to see somebody remembered I was still around. I was here for 24 years out in this chamber and sitting in every seat here, and I enjoyed it. I've set up kind of a record of 24 years. They're going to have a hard time catching that. I mean, that's not going to be like baseball. They can catch up there. This 24 is pretty hard to do. But I enjoyed all the time. I tried to help everybody I could. And I always answered my calls and took care of my business. If they wondered whether it was right or wrong, I helped them out. And I'd always bring it to the council members to vote on. And I was real pleased. And I was at the fire hall worked on every rank up there. Now when they built they built a bar in my bedroom. I was at the old station, and I didn't think that was right. But then, but I enjoyed the place and I enjoyed the people. Thank you a lot.
Babe, the mayor is out of town, as you know. Yeah. He will not be able to give you this personally, but he wanted to give that to you. Plus, he wants to set up a coffee session with you real soon, and there is a note in with this proclamation attesting to that. So, again, congratulations.
Thank you.
You don't leave too quick, babe. You know, there's a tradition I do up here. If it's your birthday, we're going to sing happy birthday to you. And everybody's going to stand because the pastor knows the choir cannot sing sitting down. So, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear babe, happy birthday to you. Now, thank you, babe. He's a horse whisperer. I don't know if you know that or not. Loves horses.
I love horses.
And I'm really impressed that they upgraded you to a Marine.
Yeah. Well, they had no choice.
They had no choice.
Saipan was where it got off on. There was on the invasion of Saipan, we got bumped. And we had to go in there, and then we went to Iwo Jima. Then I
Okay.
went to Japan, into Japan, when the war had ended.
Thank God.
Then I got to come back to Guam, and it took 90 days for them to find me a ride home.
No,
I had a ship going over, but they had
they
time to
forgot
come
you.
back.
They forgot you.
Yeah.
That happens.
But I finally got here in 46. Went in 43 and got back in 46.
So there's another, Chief Multifer, and you've probably never heard this story, but somewhere back in the old station where the Firehouse Brewery is, and I don't know if Babe was involved with this, but one of the, I don't know if it was a battalion chief or captain's pickup was out back, and someone put the garden hose in the back of the box and filled it with water overnight. Trouble is, it was winter. Do you know anything about that?
Oh, I kind of do.
Okay. We're going to leave that story right there because that's long gone, but great humor. God bless.
Yeah, we had a lot of good times.
Yes, you did. Great fire department. Thank you very much. Which leads me into, by the way, tomorrow is the MDA Fill the Boot drive for the Rapid City Fire Department. So if you see our firemen out there begging for food to buy lunch, it's really for MDA, and let's put our money in the boot, okay? Fill them up.
Yeah.
Thank you, babe.
Sure, thank you all.
Is Deanna Newharth here? Yes. Deanna Newharth? Okay, that's our veteran, I'm sorry, the veteran of the month.
You want to stay for the meeting and I'll take you home later?
But I enjoyed the work down there.
Amanda, would you like to come down for this? Thank you. Deanna Newharth? We'll get her next time. Somehow communication didn't get out.
Okay, well, you're still good too. All right. I'm going to let Jasper tell you about Youth Business Adventure, but they're celebrating 35 years in existence and the service that they provide to our state. There is a proclamation tonight that I'd like to read, and then let Jasper tell you what a wonderful program this is and introduce the two people that are also with Jasper tonight. Whereas Youth Business Adventure, a hands-on, week-long program of the South Dakota Chamber of Commerce and Industry, is celebrating 35 successful years of business and entrepreneurial education. And whereas YBA has educated over 6,300 South Dakota high school students and over 600 South Dakota educators about the realities of the business world. And whereas educators attending YBA bring business education back into their classroom, educating even more South Dakota students about businesses. And whereas YBA allows students the opportunity to receive college scholarships and college credits all while being exposed to the business and education opportunities within our state. And whereas YBA prepares South Dakota students to become more informed, productive, and educated employees and entrepreneurs. And whereas these YBA students are the future of South Dakota workforce, our greatest asset, and it is only fitting that we take time to celebrate and recognize their future impact on our economy. And whereas YBA will be held on the Black Hill State Campus June 1st through the 6th, and on the University of South Dakota campus June 15th through June 20th. And whereas May 19th, 2014 will be Youth Business Adventure Day, a special day to show local support of business education in South Dakota. Now, therefore, my privilege, I, Amanda Scott, on behalf of Mayor Sam Quaker, do hereby proclaim May 19th, 2014 as Youth Business Adventure Day. In the Rapid City, I urge all citizens to reflect on the importance of business education for South Dakota high school students and educators. Thank you very much.
My name is Jasper Deagle, and I am the Youth Business Adventure Director, and we are located, our office is in Pierre. And I first want to thank the Rapid City City Council for taking the time to recognize us. You do such important work, and we really appreciate your support with this. YBA was started in 1980 as a way to educate students about the free enterprise system in South Dakota, or free enterprise system and business opportunities in South Dakota. And the business community supports YBA financially, and we educate students throughout the state. Any high school junior can come and attend. And we feel that we really do important work because we help students become productive citizens in the future, and we help them shape what their future goals are, and teach them just about business opportunities that we have. South Dakota is a fantastic place to work and to do business, and we hope that students stay here and work in South Dakota. So thank you so much for your time. I have two people to introduce. I have Dennis Wagner, who is a Rapid City, lives here in Rapid City and also is on the YBA Advisory Board. Amanda also serves on our YBA Advisory Board, and they do really important work. They represent the business community in South Dakota. And then I also have a former student that attended YBA. Her name is Meredith Keeler, and she is a graduate of T.F. Riggs High School in Pierre. And she's just going to say a few words about how YBA impacted her and what it's doing for her future right now.
Hi, my name is Meredith. I attended YBA 2 years ago at Black Hill State University. YBA was an amazing experience, and I highly recommend attending to any high school junior. YBA inspired me to one day open my own optometry clinic here in South Dakota. I'm attending college right now and working towards that goal. YBA credits have helped me achieve this. Thanks.
My name is Dennis Wagner, and I, for the last 15 years, have been privileged to be on the YBA board, and I've served as the co-chair or the vice chair over the last 10 years. I want to make sure that you understand that we thank very much the business community and the state of South Dakota for the opportunity to prepare our next generation, the workforce and the incredible talent that we have in South Dakota, and keep them here at home. And so I want to make sure that you know that we very much appreciate the efforts of both the Chamber of Commerce here in Rapid City as well as the State Chamber of Commerce and all of its members who are the ones who put the blood, sweat, and tears into making the program successful for our youth.
This being time for an executive session, or motion to go into executive session? Those in favor say aye. So shall we be. We'll be back in a moment, folks. So, in the record, the council is back in session. Do I have a knowledge to acknowledge the discussion in executive session? Okay. Made and seconded. Is there any other discussion? Those vote in favor, say aye. Thank you. This is now the time for general public comment. Is it time for the members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the council on any issue not on the agenda? Action will not be taken at the meeting on any issue not on the agenda, except by placement on the agenda by unanimous vote of the council members present. Is there anyone here that has an issue they want to bring before the council this evening that is not on the agenda? I do not have any speaker request forms. If not, is there a motion to close this session of the council? Is there a motion made? Is there a second? Okay. We're closing it. All right. Okay, thank you. Go to consent. For consent items, right? Now is the time to open public comment for items 3 through 56, which are our public comment for consent calendars, and I have a speaker request form for item number 34. Mr. Alan McPherson. Alan, are you here? Please state your name and address for the record, please, sir.
Alan McPherson, 5311 Dan Christie Lane. Each of you have a copy of my statement and a traffic study. I personally did a traffic count Monday, May 15th at 6:54 a.m., 11:52 a.m., and 3 p.m., observing the intersection of Enchantment Road and Stumer. I will be referring to that intersection, Upper Enchantment, Lower Enchantment, West Stumer, and East Stumer. My count was where vehicles were coming from and where they were going. And the additional pages shows you the detail of the count, such as up and down Enchantment, up and down West Stumer, and upper, lower, going every direction from that intersection. These are the results. There's construction workers there, so I'm not using them in this, so it might be off 1 or 2%. Enchanted Hills residents are the overwhelming majority users of Enchantment and Stumer roads, 234 vehicles. Eagle Ridge residents, 8. Non-Enchanted Hills residents, 0. That means about 96.7% of this traffic is Enchanted Hills residents. Non-Enchanted Hills residents from the shopping center to Enchanted Hills is illogical. It's totally out of their way. Any measure to reduce traffic on East Stumer Road will force Upper Enchantment Road, Upper West Stumer Road residents down Lower Enchantment Road and back up, which drastically increases the traffic on Lower Enchantment Road. For the record, when Stumer Road was closed for the 2 years, traffic did decrease because heavy constructors were installing a city sewer line up Enchantment Road. Public Works has recommended another traffic study. Thousands of taxpayer dollars have already been spent on alternate plans, installing and removing bollards, setting up traffic counters, policing Stumer, time devoted by committees, engineers, and residents. I ask the council to examine my study, and I hope that when you do an official one, that you will use my method, where vehicles are coming from and where they are going. The great majority of Enchanted Hills residents should not be penalized with any restrictions and keep Stumer Road totally open for their use. Also, I've heard statements to the effect that the council, when they reopened, they were going against promises to those that had it closed. I say that you honored something and righted a wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next speaker item is item number 58, Dale Barcher. What's on scan? I'm sorry, Dale. Stand by. You can relax. I would assume that I'm going to hand my copy of this report that we received from you to our Public Works Department, okay? Are there anyone that we missed? On items 3 through 56. If not, we'll close. Is there a motion to close this for public comment? Okay. All right. I'm getting corrected all over the place up here. All right. Any items from 3 through 56 want to be pulled by members of the council?
Items 3 through 56.
There's a motion to approve items 3 through 56 and a second. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Next item is item number 57, which is a public comments. Thank you. Boy, it's a good thing I got a coach up here. Now, Dale. Item 58. You have to forgive me. I'm not quite back yet, so thank you.
And Alderman Wright, you remain in my prayers.
Thank you.
Okay, for your health concerns.
Thank you.
Thinking of you. Good evening. My name is Dale Barcher, and I'm a 30-year Rapid City resident of Ward 2 and the executive director of the Family Heritage Alliance. I want to begin by thanking each one of you and your families for your sacrificial service to our community. As the name of our organization implies, the Family Heritage Alliance, we are an organization that advocates for and strives to assist in strengthening thriving families. I can't imagine anyone on either side of the issue of amending our AOB ordinance who would attempt to make a case for adult-oriented businesses being a benefit in strengthening thriving families. To the best of our ability to determine, the matter before the council tonight is the amendment to the existing AOB ordinance on the books since 2003. The proposed changes are primarily about enforcement of the existing ordinance. Let's be very clear, as virtually all industries are regulated, and the regulations are only effective to the extent that they can be enforced. It seems that the proposed amendment would benefit people on both sides of this issue who are interested in staying within the law. Our Rapid City AOB ordinance, from start to finish, is a scathing rebuke of the adult-oriented business enterprise. The need for its regulation, folks, is unquestionable. Once again, amending the AOB ordinance is not something new or unheard of, as this council has done so on several occasions down through the years. Each time this ordinance was amended by this city council, our community became a safer place to raise our children and strengthen our thriving families. The FHA and our constituents respectfully ask that this, our city council, pass unanimously the proposed amendment to our AOB ordinance, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dale. Item 58 is Jill Mills.
Hello, my name is Jill Mills, and I live in Rapid City. First of all, I want to thank you all on the council for the yes vote that you gave on the first reading of Ordinance 5993. And I'm here tonight to ask that you again vote yes on the second reading of Ordinance 5993. 2 weeks ago when I spoke, I knew intuitively that sexually oriented businesses are bad for men, women, and children. Since then, however, I have done some research, and now I know how bad they really are, especially for women. Since there isn't much time, I will read just 2 short excerpts from the testimony of people who had once been in the strip club business. The first is from dancer Kelly Holsoppel. The degree of sexual violence perpetrated against strippers explodes the myths about stripping as harmless entertainment. The verbal harassment, physical and sexual abuse, and financial exploitation women suffer in strip clubs is unparalleled in any other legitimate workplace. Women in stripping are subject to actions that would be perceived as assaultive or at least unwanted in any other context, or were directed against other women. Strip clubs allow men to use and abuse women in a manner that is not tolerated in any other business. The second excerpt is from David Sherman, who had been a manager at a strip club. Between the use of drugs to medicate themselves to do what they do, and after hearing how beautiful they are all the time, they soon develop what I call BDA, basic dancer attitude. This is when the dancer thinks that no matter what friends, children, husband, and families think about them, They can all be replaced because all of the patrons around them find them attractive, beautiful, and idolized. All that was close in terms of family and friends can be replaced. Now they are truly caught in the adult scene. With friends and family gone from their lives, they solely exist in this dark subculture of sex, drugs, alcohol, and prostitution. All of this perverse living to the dancer is now just part of their normal lifestyle. Then David Sherman says this about the dancers that are getting older. The cycle then becomes even more vicious, with depression, drugs, alcohol, and body mutilation to stay thin. Finally, they realize they can no longer keep up with the new and younger girls and leave, going to one of 5 places. 1, they go to a very filthy, dirty, nasty club that's full of girls in their position. Here they perform and do some of the most vile and filthy acts you can imagine to make money. 2, prostitution, meeting customers outside of the club. Their job now becomes a place for them to meet new, quote, clients, unquote. 3, marriage. They'll do this just to be able to still survive, but the addiction to drugs and alcohol normally shatters and destroys these relationships. 4, some actually do break away and go to school to become productive citizens, but this frequency is around 1 of 50. 5, they become society's throwaway people, used up, degraded, abused, and even sold by the people who own these establishments. If anyone here would like to read these entire testimonies, along with many others, they can be found at ccv.org. That's Citizens for Community Values at ccv.org. Please vote yes on Ordinance 5993. Thank you.
Aaron Johnson.
Aaron Johnson, owner of Shotgun Willie's, 2808 West Main. I'll just reserve my comments for later and just here for any questioning. Thanks.
Thank you, Aaron. Item number 58, Brad, is it Clausen? Yes. Brad?
Thank you, City Council, for seeing me. My name is Pastor Brad Clausen. I live in Rapid City, 4029 Terry Drive. I was here 2 weeks ago, and a couple of comments were made that I felt like I needed to speak into. One comment was that we can't regulate morality. The whole concept and idea of law is that you regulate morality. You regulate it on a basis of belief systems. And the idea that we somehow can't regulate a behavior because we're somehow harming somebody or taking away something or not allowing something to take place is a fallacious argument. It's a false argument. We live in a pluralistic society, so the challenge is under whose value system will we regulate. We elect you to help us make those decisions, to work through various theological and practical applications of law. What's right, what's wrong, and where does it come from, and how does it apply in our lives? And everybody needs to work those things through, both personally, but as a community. Our personal laws, our personal moralities vary, but the society has a right to somehow bring some regulations to some ideas and some actions. Some behaviors have to be regulated. They have to be approved or disapproved. As a Christian pastor, I use the scriptures, the Bible, for my form of understanding what is right and wrong. Another group would come from a different background. Maybe a Buddhist or a Hindu or a Native American would have their own cultural backgrounds from which they make their determination of what's right and wrong. But you know what? None of them would say murder's right. None of them would say incest is right. There's not a culture in the world that approves those behaviors. The challenge then for us is what kind of behaviors will we allow in our city? And that's where you guys get to wrestle these things through. We're not talking about billboards and cheerleaders. We're talking about behaviors in a private club. As a pastor, I've had the opportunity or the misfortune or the challenge. I'm sorry. When I was in Africa, I had a young lady who was 22 years old start to cry as she unfolded and unpacked the rape that took place by her boss. I had a lady in my house a few years ago here in Rapid who was still half drunk because it was the only way she could confess the incest that took place in her family background from her grandfathers and brothers and uncles. That leads me into the other idea that came back, that was brought up last week. Well, you know, boys will be boys, kind of the wink-wink thing. We had a doctor stand up here at the very beginning.
We've got a 3-minute limit,
Oh,
so if you could
sorry.
wrap it up, please.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Next item is item number 61, Joy McCracken.
Hi, I'm Joy McCracken. I'm the Executive Director for Dakota Land Trust, and I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to speak just 3 minutes on Dakota Land Trust and try to educate everyone on the program and how it benefits our community. Dakota Land Trust was formed in 2007 after a task force found that the families in our communities was no longer able to find a home they could afford within their price range. They were qualified for the loan, and there was no homes available. And the price range I'm speaking of is maybe $100,000, $125,000. After our research, that is when we decided to form Dakota Land Trust, because it's a way of creating affordability perpetually. So we partnered up with Black Hills Vision, and they gave us some operating dollars, and we also partnered up with South Dakota Housing, who gave us a $300,000 match grant to purchase land. The city of Spearfish became very interested in this right out of the hat because their employers could not find employees because they were all moving out of town because they couldn't afford to buy a home. So a local developer thought this is an excellent idea because it's a way he could give back to his community. So he gave up all of his profits on 10 lots. The city became a TIP applicant and purchased these 10 lots on behalf of Dakota Land Trust. That gave us our match for our South Dakota Housing loan. Today we have 22 families in Dakota Land Trust. We have 5 in Rapid City that we were able to purchase the land through City GB money and the South Dakota Housing money. We have 2 in Sturgis, 1 in Bell, 2 in Lead, 8 in Spearfish, 1 in Hot Springs, and 2 in Box Elder. So we do cover the whole 6 counties of the Black Hills. These families are single people, and oftentimes, even if they are 80% of the area median income, which means they're making $40,000 a year, and they might have some student loans, they can't find a home within their price range. We also have single parents, a lot of single moms, and their main goal is to have a decent, safe, affordable home for their children to come home to, somebody that they'll be proud of. And we also have large families. These are all working people, people that are very creditworthy. They're nurses, and they have a teacher. We have people working at Walmart. We have a Subway manager, someone at Perkins. The Dakota Land Trust is a shared equity program, which means that when they sell their home, they do not take all the equity with them. They leave a portion of it with the home. That's what keeps it affordable from generation to generation. Because it is a shared equity program, it is not for everyone. If you can afford to buy a home in today's market, you need to do that, and so that you can receive 100% of your equity. But we have many families that cannot afford to buy a home in today's market due to their low income, not because of their credit, because they're just low income families. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes any speaker requests forms that I have for items that are on the agenda for public comment. Is there anyone that I've missed by chance? If not, is there a motion to close? Okay. Okay. We can do it. Just keep moving, right? So we have item number 57, and that is an ordinance that comes from Legal and Finance.
It's me.
Be read by Chad Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 57 is the second reading of Ordinance 5991, an ordinance to allow pet stores as a conditional use in the Central Business District by amending Section 17.16.030 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. I move approval.
Second.
Any comments or discussion? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Item number 58.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 58 is second reading of ordinance 5993, an ordinance to require certain adult-oriented businesses to provide unobstructed view and patron permitted areas, to define knowledge as it pertains to licensees, and delineate the hearing process for adverse action against licensees in the city of Rapid City by amending chapters 5.70 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. I move approval.
Second.
Motion made and second. Is there any discussion, comment from the crowd, or the council, excuse me? Not, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 59, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 59 is first reading of ordinance 5987, supplemental appropriation number 2 for 2014. I move approval.
Second.
The motion made and second. Any discussion or comments? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 60, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 60 is first reading of ordinance 5992, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning and described within property as requested by Spirla Consulting for Inc. for Shriner Investments, LLC, from General Agricultural District to Low Density Residential District, for property generally described as being west of the existing intersection of Enchanted Pines Drive and Medicine Ridge Road. I move approval.
Made a motion to approve, and there's a second. Any discussion, questions, or comments? If not, those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 61.
Item number 61 is legal approved requested CDBG policy changes for fiscal year 2015. I move approval. No, actually, I don't move approval. I will yield the floor to Barb Garcia for a short presentation.
We do have a motion to approve. You're going to wait till after? Okay, okay.
Barbara Garcia, Community Development. Legal and Finance asked me to come forward and do the presentation for the whole council rather than just them. And it's very short. I'll try to whip right through this, but it had to do with the recommended changes to CDBG. The first 4 of them, which were, I'll just remind you, changing the subsidy committee to the investment committee, the city identifying specific priorities to go after with the funds rather than broad RFPs. If I can get going in the right direction. The third, direct staff to go after other funding sources if there were no nonprofits available or able to apply for them, and cities could, that would benefit our community if it also met the function and current staffing of our community development division. And recommendation 4 was that we need to develop a plan to create a low-interest revolving loan fund to assist low-income homeowners with sidewalk repairs and tree removal, which are 2 big safety issues in the community. The 5th and 6th ones were the ones that you wanted more information on, understanding to do with the TIFs and how we could promote low-income housing development for permanent affordability, using CDBG funds, TIFs, or inclusionary zoning. And how we could do that, these are some of the examples of how. It's up to us as a community to determine which ones we want to use, what works for us, what doesn't. But some of the ideas of how it's being used around the country successfully, and these are all well-established programs that I'm talking about, not brand new ones. Placing land in a land trust for permanent affordability. You could provide incentives, encouragement, or requirements to people who are targeting specific high priority needs, like our SROs, single resident occupancy apartments. You could offer the incentive for those who would build some as the incentive, using the TIF as an incentive, using CDBG dollars as an incentive. Dedicate certain percentage of the units for low-income households. Guarantee long-term affordability of units. If somebody's willing to guarantee long-term affordability in an apartment complex, they're going to build one and they say that they'll give 10% of the apartments or 15% of them for low income, and they'll ensure that for 30 or 40 years, those apartments stay affordable. The rest could be market rate and they can keep going up, but that would be an incentive. We provide them some assistance to help make that happen. If we looked at building low-income housing close to targeted transportation, One of the big issues is not being close enough to transportation and services for people who don't have that. So we need to incentivize maybe some low affordable housing in those areas. Encouraging one-level housing for elderly and those with disabilities. We have a very small amount of housing, and we have a very big tidal wave of baby boomers and people who are going to need that going forward. Offering density bonuses for permanent affordable housing. So maybe if somebody's going to build a new subdivision and they're willing to put a certain percentage, and you notice I keep saying a certain percentage, to be determined, but not a whole subdivision. We do not want to create a whole nother Lakota Homes where everybody is in one spot. I'm talking about diversified throughout the community where they're available anywhere. Rezoning underutilized commercial zones. This has been done in some of the other areas, if we had any, that could be used and they're close to services. Why would we support the land trust? Well, Joy kind of gave you an idea. There's a huge gap growing between wages. They're staying relatively flat, and yet the cost of housing keeps going up. Lots for our nonprofit housing agencies were $15,000 10 years ago, and they are now $35,000. So right there, you've priced somebody right out of a house, and they won't catch up. For a low-income person, they aren't going to catch up without some sort of assistance. And the dollar amount that's needed is getting higher, so we need to figure out some other way of doing it. The land trusts are, what they do for us is they remove the land from the formula. They aren't paying for the land. They only have to pay for the house. So let's say we're building a new house now. The lot costs $35,000, the house costs another $100,000 to build. You have a $135,000 house. If you take the $35,000 out, they only have to finance $100,000. That helps to bring the affordability into the range that they can do. It remains affordable forever. They get a 99-year lease. It's renewable for 99 years. It can be inherited by their family. They have all the same rights of home ownership. The only thing that they're giving up is walking away with all of the equity that you would do in a traditional home deal. This provides a stepping stone for people to move into traditional home ownership at some point in the future. But you have to get your foot in the door somehow first. Because for a low-income person to save up the down payment and closing costs, it's going to take them 5 to 10 years. And by that time, you saw on that graph where it's going to be, they will still be that far below the ability to do it. Who would be interested? Joy already told you. It would not be the person who can qualify for a regular mortgage loan and there is a house out there in that price range for them. By all means, they should buy the traditional way. They are not the client we're looking for the land trusts. What we're looking for are those buyers who have good credit, they've been making payments. Often their rent is as much or more with interest rates today as a house to own. And when you're paying rent, you get no equity. 10 years from when you walk away, you're lucky if you get your deposit back. You have nothing. At least with being in the land trust, you will accumulate some equity. You are starting down the road, and you have something to then turn around and pay for your kids' college. You could still pull it out. You have the opportunity to refinance. Again, it just takes the money out. It's renewable. I've already touched on all those. It's the same benefits of regular home, but it brings the affordability down where they're sharing it with the future buyers. How that works, here's the example. Under the land trust, now land trusts when they set up have the option of setting whatever percentage they want or need to do to be viable. And in this case, I believe Joyce's is at 25%. And so in that, the first step, they find the house, it's $140,000. They may use block grant funds. I may have funded with block grants one of the housing agencies like Joyce, and they're going to provide the $35,000 as a grant that goes to purchase the lot, and when they close on this deal, the lot will then go into the land trust, and the person will have the house. If we take the $35,000 out, in this scenario, the person will finance at a bank $105,000. 10 years later, let's say that it's appreciated to $160,000. That's a $20,000 increase. And normally, the traditional homeowner, that's their money to pocket when they leave. In this case, though, they're going to share. They get 25% of that. The rest stays with the house. So they have $5,000 that they're walking away with. Plus, during that 10 years, they've had all the same homeowner tax advantages and deductions that anybody else gets. So this is an advantage to them. They still had the safety in a house in a neighborhood they want to be in, near schools they want to be near. And if they were a renter, they'd have nothing. They wouldn't have $5,000. The resale, now here's where the permanent affordability comes in. When they go to sell it, they're going to take the original price of the house of $105,000 plus their share of the equity, which was $5,000 that was pulled out and taken away. And that leaves $110,000 is what the new buyer will purchase. That's what they will finance. So it's not gone up a lot. And what this does is, right now, with CDBG grants, with all of my housing agencies, they are required to recover those funds. So they may provide $35,000 on one now. And when that person sells the house or refinances, it has to get paid back. So we pull that money back. So yes, we're getting money back to reuse again. But what we don't get is the permanent affordability of that unit. Because now, when they sell that house at $160,000, that's a middle-income person. That's not a low-income person who can afford it. We have lost that housing unit for being affordable for the rest of the low-income people who will come behind them. They've moved up and out into their middle-class house now, but we still need the unit for the low-income person. So that's the difference between the land trust and how we're already handling the block grant funds. We want to need permanent affordable units to remain, because right now in Rapid City there are next to none for anybody to purchase or even rent. And as the rents keep getting bought, or houses keep getting bought by investors, and they're converting them to market rate, and they're renting them for $700, $800, $900, that does not leave any of the small affordable houses for those people who really need them. Some of the examples that I put on this, and it is linked on your links, you can go back and look at. I handed out a handout at the last meeting that talked about the First Homes program in Rochester, and that had a really good example of the land trust and TIFs both together used on them. But some of the recommendations, I'm not going to go through them, but tying a percentage of the TIF funding and or housing units to affordable housing, not all of them, but a portion, those which are reasonable and make sense to do. Providing a developer's incentive or a payback to them to add some units in their development for affordable housing. Using it as an incentive for mixed use. And say you have 150,000, 60, 70, 80,000 within a subdivision. That's a mixed use. Those at the 150, if they would give us a break on a couple of their worst lots, and we have the assistance money to add to that, we can get that down to the 125,000 range or the 110,000 range. Again, to have an affordable. The house is still a $150,000 house, but we can now put one of our low-income people in it at a rate they can afford. San Francisco, they have put a requirement of a 20% of any TIF that the city lends out are tied to building and preserving. 15% or of the units built in a TIF must be affordable. Maine uses them if somebody's doing an affordable housing development. They're providing the incentive of the TIF for street improvements or school construction for the expanding population. Portland, Oregon mandates that 30% of any TIF resources that come in get put into a fund for affordable housing, a set-aside fund. So when that TIF starts paying back, they're saying that they're going to take a percentage of the money that's coming back off of the TIF. It's not coming from the developer having to give it up there, but it's the regular payments as those houses come online, that they're going to take a percentage of that and set it aside to help develop the affordable housing that we need the assistance. It's a way of financing it without causing a lot of hurt to anybody or having to come up with another new funding source out there. It's just a way of diverting some of the funds out of a general fund into a set-aside fund targeted to addressing some of the highest needs of housing. Austin, Texas did something unique. They did not have any land trust developments around them. The city itself created one. They had gentrification in the downtown area, that everybody, the costs were going up, and the low-income people and the people who'd lived there, the elders who like to walk in the downtown area and be close, were being forced out because the costs kept climbing. And so they went into doing the land trust and started buying up the properties in the downtown area so that they would ensure that those low-income people or people working downtown would still have affordable housing near where they worked. Massachusetts municipalities have to demonstrate a need for multifamily housing, but they'll allow them to build in commercial centers where there's not much going on in the evening. It's pretty much just during the daytime. So maybe they'll put some multifamily housing near there because that's where jobs are, and they can be affordable housing. It's not where you'd put your $300,000 houses, but it's close to where low-income people work, so they would be interested in being in that area. Utah, on any TIF that's given out that generates $100,000 in annual tax increments or more, they must set aside a minimum of 20% of those funds into a set aside for affordable housing construction, retention, or development. So those are just some of the ideas that can be used, how it can be used. My recommendation is that you break off the first four. If you want more discussion or planning, I would recommend that you direct staff, not necessarily me, because I am not the guru of TIFs. I am the guru of how affordable housing might be a possibility within a TIF. But, request that staff bring together all the stakeholders. Developers and builders and the community all need to sit around about the table and say, okay, if you don't want TIFs to be used this way, then help us figure out how can we still address affordable housing. Help come up with the ideas on how we can do it, or how can we structure this. I don't know the legalities. That's what the attorney's office, which of these can be used here, or which ones need legislative attention to go, you guys to go to the state and say, this is something we need to be able to use in our state. Can we look at changing some of those TIF laws? So that's my recommendation.
Thank you, Barb. We do not have a motion before us, but Richie Nordstrom? I know you do. I said we do not. Richie, you want to handle that?
Thank you, Mr. President. If I may, I would like to make that motion. We do adoption of the four first recommendations, 1, 2, 3, 4, and recommendation number 5 to be sent to the TIF committee, or at least to the proper staff that needs to be addressing the TIF aspect of this whole thing.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry?
I just want to make sure items 1, 2, 3, and 4 are referencing the document as opposed to the presentation, because I believe they were numbered differently. So could you please clarify which 1, 2, 3, 4 you're referring to, please?
Okay. And
maybe state them.
Sure. And I'm going by what Barb Garcia is presenting here as the recommendations on the slides, is that to start with recommendation 1 is to revamp the subsidy committee, to create an investment committee, in other words, rename it to the investment committee. Recommendation 2 is the city identify the most important priorities to focus on and make RFPs specific for types of housing or services. Item 3, recommendation 3 is direct staff to apply for and administer other funding when beneficial to the community, nonprofits unable to do so, and fits with the function and current staffing of the CD division, that's Community Development Division. And recommendation 4 is develop a plan to create low-interest revolving loan fund to assist low-income homeowners with sidewalk repairs, street removal, and et cetera. Am I stating that pretty close, Barb?
You said develop a plan for the revolving loan fund, correct? I didn't hear the word plan, but I might have missed you.
If that, yeah, recommendation 4 is develop a plan.
Yeah, okay.
To create low interest.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's my motion. And if I get a second,
I'll
I'd like to
second.
retain. Okay. And Mr. Chair, if I may address a couple of these points, and I've got quite a list, and so I will yield the floor here in a few minutes. But what I would like to start off with is this is something I started working on approximately a year ago through a little bit of tutelage from Barb Garcia and Joy McCracken. Thank you very much for your assistance as well. And it started all off for me with quality, affordable housing. And we've got a growing concern within the city of Rapid City of quality, affordable housing. And that leads into demolition of those type of houses, or where do those people go with those types of houses or substandard housing? Where do they go? And we just don't have the inventory. This will help alleviate that. The land trust portion of it is not owned by the city, and Barb, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would go into Dakota Land Trust. They would be the administrators of the land trust portion of it, or that's our intent anyway. And then the other part of it is especially on the diversity of the housing that we have here in Rapid City. One of the comments was made at the last Legal and Finance Committee was that the TIF would be something in the area for very high-end homes and taking up those subdivision projects, and that's not what we're after. That's not what this is intending to do. So the TIF committee can address those specific issues as they come along, and they can better qualified to address those issues in the TIF. I really appreciate, Barb, what you presented on that affordability gap slide that you showed on there, because it does demonstrate how the low income is stationed within the city of Rapid City, and we're not unique. It's pretty much nationwide, and whereas the land value keeps increasing over the years, and our wages are falling behind, and it's getting to be more of a challenge to be able to save that money so they can get that first home. Let's see, the other large thing that is happening with these 4 recommendations to start with is that we're not reinventing the wheel. Other cities have established a practice very similar to this, and we can even adopt those other practices, or we can adjust and modify those practices to fit Rapid City much better. And I agree with Barb Garcia to come forward with other additional stakeholders, and especially on the TIF side, to have addressed those items. So this is just a starting point. It takes a long time to really understand this thing, and I'm just concerned because of the time that is being allowed to be brought forward on this project or this recommendation for changes. We're not getting the entire picture on this. So, Barb, again, thank you very much. Joy, thank you for your presentation, your time here tonight. I'll yield the floor.
Next speaker is Amanda.
Thank you, Mr. President. Barb, for clarification purposes, you're bringing forth these recommendations, and I know it's covered a little bit of time here between all these meetings, but you're bringing forth these recommendations in order to prepare the 2015 grant? Is that correct?
That's correct. The way our funding years go for block grant funds, we're just now rolling out 2014. We just got our budget for 2014. 2015, I have to put out the RFPs for people to apply for the funds in August. That is when they come to the training. Their grant applications are due to me by October 1st. We won't find out how much money we have, though, probably until January. January, February, March timeframe is usually when we hear. So for me to be able to put it out for people to apply for funding if we're going to change our policies on how we put it out, which the RFPs, I'm saying we haven't had anybody build single units or efficiencies in an affordable range since 1976, when it was a high priority, and it's been a high priority in our plan every year since then. But there's no incentive for anybody to build them because they aren't real profitable to an investor. When you're talking rents in the $350 to $500 range. We also had zoning laws that had minimum square footages and sizes. So somehow we have to incentivize people to do it. And the reason I'm bringing forward the changes of why we should change it is we may not have block grant funds past 2015. It's questionable whether we will get them still in 2015 because HUD wants to change how entitlement cities are chosen. There will continue to be block grant funds, but our city does not get over $500,000 a year. And the proposal that HUD has put forward last year, and they're putting it forward again this year, is if an entitlement city gets less than $500,000, they will cut them. They're trying to reduce the number of cities that get the funds to give larger amounts to fewer. And so if we're going to do anything with our funds and really make a difference while we still have the opportunity to use the funds, now is the time to do it. So we want to get those changes in so that we can really focus and try to force my nonprofits to change what they're doing and actually address the root problems. We put a lot of Band-Aids with our funds. We do a lot of emergency Band-Aids. We do not address the root issues. And United Way and Vakurovich Foundation and myself are trying to work together to force everybody to come together and start addressing those root issues to reduce the number of emergencies and Band-Aids we have to do. But you have to get started on them, and this is what I want to do with the changes.
And so your recommendation is the 4 items that Alderman Nordstrom is proposing that we pass tonight. Those are the 4 that you need for your RFPs going out for 2015?
Yes.
You do not need to for the council to address the other one at this time?
No. They don't really affect that. At any point, development can happen, and it won't affect the RFPs that we're asking for 2015.
Because the TIFs and everything, all of that's just another avenue in order to address
Right.
that the city should take on and at least consider and investigate and look into.
Yeah, you could put those forward at any time, and whatever developments are coming at that time could then apply if it meets the needs and on both sides of the city and theirs on the private side. Those are ideas, but we have to start exploring them because those are the kind of ideas that take a long time to work out details about TIFs. There's state law and local law and all of the other things that go with it. I know that's not going to happen this year and maybe not even next year at the way it moves. But if we don't get started and actually start really trying to push on some of those, we'll never see it.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification, Barb. I yield the floor.
Bonnie Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. It's so nice to have you here, looking so fine.
Glad to be back.
I want to say that the time that I've been on the council, that this has been an ongoing issue. I served on the investment committee for a couple of years, and the way the city does things now is real piecemeal. We give a little money to this, a little money to that, instead of trying to direct the root causes. And so this is a big issue, and also timely in that the Vakurovich Foundation and all, like Barb said, they've launched a poverty initiative. I don't know how many of you went to that presentation. So we need to try to direct our funding to root causes. We're going to have a huge explosion of boomers. You retire on Social Security, if that's your only money, that's like $800 a month on the, on the low end. And so since we have lower incomes here, we're going to have a lot of our citizens only bringing in about $800 a month. And it's hard to pay for a $700 apartment if that's all you have to live on. So we need really low-cost housing. The other issue that we have is that on the reservations, the population, over half of them are under 18, and that population is going to be exploding also, and people wanting to move to Rapid City. So the city needs to get very serious about what we can do, how we can maximize our funding to start addressing these issues, because council, I think in 10, 20 years, they're not going to even know what to do with themselves. It's going to be such a big problem. So I think we need to move forward. And I won't be here to address the TIF issue, but I do think there are ways that the city can develop win-wins that to help, incentivize the developers to try to do what we need them to do. I'm not saying forcing them, but if you say we're going to give money, we'll authorize a TIF if it does this, and really stick with it. And that's been an ongoing issue to begin with. So anyway, but that's for another night, that part of it. But thank you.
I have no other speaker requests. We have a motion before us, as I understand it, to adopt items 1 through 4 and to refer item 5 to the TIF committee and staff. Is that correct? Was it second by Peterson?
Did you want to get Charity first, sir?
Oh, you're back on the wire. Okay. I didn't see it. Thank you. Yes, Charity.
I am, and I just want to make sure that it's clear for Charlene's sake and for the public's sake, because the document we have had linked to this agenda item for the majority of the time has been one that proposed 6 recommendations. The presentation tonight only recommended 5, the first 4 of which were needed for, or requested for immediate approval. And the numbers are different. As far as the items versus the numbers are different from the presentation versus the document. So that's why I asked for clarification on which 4 items we were actually incorporating into that motion. And I mean, it even got a little bit long for me to track. So
To clarify the record, this is the 5 items as presented in the presentation?
There were 6 items presented. The 5th was the land trust. The 6th was the TIF.
Okay.
In the listing, there were actually 6.
Okay.
And you hadn't said one way or the other about the land trust. I don't have the original paper with me in front of me to know which numbers, the original linked document.
In the presentation, there are 5.
No, keep going one more slide. There's a 6th. Just before I went into the slide just before the San Francisco and...
Let's back up.
Yeah.
But
Page
again, when
12.
we were talking about the numbers, number 6 on here is number 4 in here.
I'm sorry, I didn't have that. Yeah.
That's why there was all that confusion, because there's a lot more detail in the document than there was in the actual slideshow.
Right.
And I don't know, for me, it just feels a little weird to make a motion off of a slideshow as opposed to making it off of an actual document that we've studied. So maybe that's my issue.
Charlene, yeah. Charlene, would you read back to the motion and content of the motion as you see it? Or read it, I've written it.
The motion I have is to adopt recommendations 1 through 4 and to request that recommendation 5 be referred to the appropriate staff for further study.
And your understanding of the items 1 through 4 are which? And item 5 is the TIF. What's items 1 through 4?
Based on the slide presentation, revamping subsidy committee to an investment committee, identify your priorities, directing staff to apply for funding. I'm sorry I was short-handing this, and develop a plan to create low-interest revolving loan fund.
Okay.
And number 5 was the TIF committee. I mean, if you want, what I can do is match the slides to the document, to both documents, and work to make certain everything is.
I think we'll go with what you said. If there's further discussion, Steve,
Okay.
I don't see you up, but Steve, would you like to?
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted, if Barb, if you do have the document in front of you that we have on the agenda?
I don't. That's
You
what
don't.
I was saying. That's why I can't.
Right.
I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, I think it would be ideal if we could identify the ones on the document and match them up with the 4 that Richie is saying, and maybe Richie can clarify that. I don't know if you can, Richie, or
I
not.
could do
but
that for you right now if you'd like.
That's
Mr.
what we
Chair.
want to know.
Okay.
Apparently Charity can clarify and see if
Item number
Charlene
1
agrees.
actually corresponds to recommendation number 2 in the document. Item number 2 from the presentation today corresponds with recommendation number 1 in the document. Item number 3 corresponds with recommendation number 6 in the document. And item number 4 corresponds with recommendation number 5 in the document. And this is
As
city
chair,
government at its finest, folks.
Okay, as chair, I'd like to have Charlene again state, you made the motion maker. Are you okay with what she said?
Yes, I am. Yep.
Seconder?
Thank you. I have a question because it sounds like in the motion that it was not asked for the land trust to come back or the TIF. And so my understanding that we'd want both the land trust and the TIF to come back. Or you want to approve that tonight?
May the chair make a recommendation with a massive amount of confusion up here. Can this be wait 2 weeks and come back in a proper order so we can
Yes.
vote accordingly? Do I have a
I can
motion
do
to that
that,
effect?
yes.
Have a motion? Have a second? Is that reasonable? Substitute motion, I'm sorry. So I have a substitute motion to refer this back to our next meeting and get this straightened out. Made by Amanda, seconded by John. Okay, we have a second, an amended motion. And Richie?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to make sure that one of the other things, if Barb, if you will be bringing back on, let me get to the correct page here. Recommendation number 1, as I stated it, it was that the subsidy committee to be created or changed to the investment committee. And just wanted
Point of order. Motions on the floor is to continue this item for 2 weeks, not about the rest of the.
If I may, Mr. Chair, respond, is that I'm just looking for a clarification on the subsidy committee, who is going to be on that investment committee. That's all I'm asking.
That could be handled, I think, later on. Right now, we're asking for the issues to come to us in a clear voice so we can understand and make a vote. Charlene?
I'm okay with that, with the delay, but I just wanted to make sure everybody understood, or we will be coming back with further information on what the investment committee is.
I would assume we will. Charlene, you had a question?
Do you want this to come back to Legal and Finance or straight to Council?
Straight to council.
Thank you.
That's the way it was made, right? I would suggest that proper correspondence be prepared prior to that. It's consistent with what will be presented and read and make life a lot easier for everybody.
Yep.
Those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Barb.
Thank you.
Charity, I'm sorry.
That's okay, Mr. Chair. Just going to help Richie out, if I may.
You may speak. My error was,
you.
the error was my part.
The whole point, Mr. Nordstrom, of going back to the document is that the answer to your question is within that document. Most of the highlighted details were in that, and so it was what the public studied, whomever may have cared to follow this item, as well as what the council, I think, predominantly referenced in discussing these issues. So take a look at it, and I think your answers are therein.
As chair and president of the council, I'd say there are some pretty heavy items in this issue that should be discussed, and I would suggest that some education efforts be made by the department and so forth to the members of the council so we have a better understanding of the issues and the documents. Next item, item number 62.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 62 is authorize the mayor and finance officer to sign a settlement agreement between City of Rapid City and Highmark Inc. I move approval.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 63.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item number 63 is request approval to apply for 3 grants to improve the department's capacity to provide public safety services to the community and accepted if awarded. I move approval.
Any question? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 64.
Item 64 is a request by Stephen Gowan for reimbursement of abatement in the sum of $72 $134, excuse me, 134 Anamosa Street. I yield the floor.
Okay. Pauline.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for a reference point, of the $72, the city has expended $30 for this. The other $42 is administrative costs. From the finance office perspective, if you are going to do anything with waiving this assessment, that you would keep the $30 actual dollars spent already by the city intact and waive the administration fee. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. Bonnie?
I make a
No, I have a
motion
Go ahead.
that we keep the $30 fee and waive the $2 city fee. And if I get a second, I will say more.
Motion made, okay, motion made and seconded. Go ahead,
Okay.
Bonnie.
And I'm not sure if Wade can weigh in on this, or maybe we need Terry to, but I believe the law requires people to keep their sidewalks clear, and the depth of it is not an issue, but I don't know, maybe it is the depth of the snow. And my concern is just precedent for other people saying,
That's probably a code enforcement issue, but
and why
Wade?
they didn't call to say they had a problem, or
Can you help her on this one, Wade?
I believe it's just keeping the sidewalks clear. I was looking for the ordinance right now.
it was stated in Legal and Finance that the sidewalks were more than passable, and I agree that they were, but they were not clear either. And there could be ice. I don't know. Maybe I see Amanda's going to speak to this issue. She might be able to clarify it some, but I just have concerns for precedent this could set, and I will yield the floor, and then maybe when Wade finds it, he can let us know if that's acceptable.
Thank you. Amanda?
Thank you.
Thank you. I did try to contact Mr. Goen today, and I was still unable to get a hold of him. Last week, he had some medical issues that arose, and he had to go down to the VA in Hot Springs. From talking with him on this, and even though he's a member of Ward 4, in order to follow policy, I'll let it be known on record, I'm in favor of just approving the administration fee because there were costs associated to the city, which involves the taxpayer of paying for his snow removal. In answer to Alderwoman Peterson's question on why he didn't notify the city, according to Mr. Goen, he did not receive notification to clear the sidewalk. So it's hard to go back and forth on that one. But I can tell you Mr. Goen is on fixed income, and every dollar means a lot to him. And so one of the reasons that he is coming before the city council is if he can get any type of reimbursement on this, because he was in a situation where he had knee surgery. He could not comply with the snow removal, and he was a little upset when he saw that the administration fee was actually more than what it costs to remove the snow, and that's always a hard one to explain. So he was basically coming back and asking for any type of reimbursement, if at all possible, due to his circumstances. When I did check with code enforcement, he has never had any type of abatement applied to his property in the past, so this is his first offense. And he did have extenuating circumstances. But I will also, as a council member representing the rest of the taxpayers, I will admit I'm in support of waiving the administration fee because that is a precedent that has already been set. The city council has waived administrative fees for citizens in the past. But to my knowledge, we've always upheld the actual costs incurred, as Pauline Sumption indicated. Thank you.
Wade?
The ordinance does say that the duty of the owner of the property is to keep the sidewalk free from snow and ice at all times. It declares a sidewalk that's not kept free from snow and ice as a nuisance. and allows abatement in that case.
To cut the debate short, if I could, I will say this, that if you will vote to waive the $42 fee, an anonymous veteran will pay the $30. Can we do that? Good. Consider it done. If you'll vote to waive the $42 fee, an anonymous veteran will pay the $30. Suggestion?
You want to substitute?
Yes. Okay, that's what'll happen. The anonymous veteran will pay him. Huh?
If I can address
Pay it
Pauline
for him.
Sumption's thing, but one of the issues is why he has to come before council is he's already paid. That's the only way that he can come forward at this time, is because he didn't want to incur additional fees for not paying. So in my mind, he's a citizen that was trying to comply, did not want to have to accrue any more, and so he did pay his bill timely. But he is asking for a reimbursement of the administration. Well, he's asking for a reimbursement of all of it, but he would be happy to get any type of money back. Thank you.
The offer still stands, however it shakes out. It will waive the $42 fee. An anonymous veteran will reimburse whoever party is the $30 coming forward with. How's that? Did I say that correctly, Attorney? Well, whatever. You okay? All right.
I believe that's
Okay with that, Bonnie? Accept the amendment? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Charity, did you want to say something? I keep going by you. It's a very unusual evening. Well, this thing keeps disappearing on me, so.
Okay, so.
But you may speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your generosity and
Well, I
your
didn't say it was
flexibility.
me. It's an anonymous veteran, so
Well,
thank you.
No, in the flexibility of running the meeting. But I just wanted to put it out there. Does it strike anyone else as odd that the ordinance says you have to keep it free of snow and ice at all times? I mean, think about some of these snow events that we've had where it is coming down every hour for days in a row. I mean, I have never seen anybody camped out with a snow shovel, so as soon as it falls, they're out there taking care of it. I think we need to have a little bit of flexibility with that. And I don't know if it's going to require an ordinance change or maybe a code enforcement kind of unwritten policy, but, you know, if we take it to the letter of the law, I mean, it does get a bit extreme, so.
We're not going to discuss this one anymore. I think that we'll talk about this later, but good comment. Very good
The
comment.
ordinance actually says 24 hours after snow.
Okay. We need to vote. Oh, Bill, I'm sorry.
Voted.
Bill? No, we're not. We're not. We're done. Unless you want to talk about it, but I don't want to. It might snow. Time we get done talking this, it might be snowing again. Bonnie, did you have one other? Do you want to say anything? You're still on the key, or do I need to?
I was just going to say that I agree with Alderwoman Doyle, but it needs to come later because I know that after the storm, if I could have paid $72 to have someone clear my sidewalk, I would have been all about that. So, but it needs to come forward another way.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Worthy discussion. Next item is our Compass items, item number 65. With this, I'll have our Compass Committee Rep, Amanda Scott.
I don't care, whatever.
Thank you. The Compass Chair, Colleen Schmidt, called me today, and she has strep throat. And so she graciously opted to not bring it to the council chambers and pass it on to the rest of us, and I thanked her a lot for that. So tonight, council members, I don't know if you've met our vice chairwoman, Dot Rasmussen, but Dot Rasmussen is here with the Compass auditor, Kellen Kelly, and they would like to go ahead and present the two audits. Dot, Kellen?
Okay, we're on.
Thank you very much, Ms. Scott, and thank you, President Wright. We have the second two of the completed audits to present tonight, and we'll try and move through these fairly quickly. The committee members have seen, our committee members have seen the audits and voted to approve them, and the council members have been provided copies on 2 occasions of these reports, and they were linked up as well to the agenda this evening. The first audit is our citywide cash handling 2 audit. Before I get to the presentation, I would like to thank the staff in the departments that were affected by this audit. It would be staff in several divisions of the Public Works Department, the Parks and Recreation Department's Aquatic Division, and the 2 library branches at Western Dakota Tech, as well as, I believe it's General Beadle Elementary School. A great deal of cooperation on the part of those individual staff members that received us when we did the audits. As you know, cash handling is a very visible and important government fiscal function. It affects a lot of citizens, and citizens expect the government to provide high-quality services, but at the same time, they want us to be accountable for the public funds. That's the main reason we did these 2 cash handling audits, was to look at internal controls over the city's handling of cash and other resources. This audit had 4 main objectives. We wanted to look at the internal controls to see if they were appropriate, determine if cash was collected, receipted, recorded, deposited, transported, reconciled, and secured in an adequate and accurate manner, ensure that fund balances were accurate. We would be dealing with petty cash and change funds here, that the limits on them were appropriate for the use, and that proper controls were in place over those accounts as well. Finally, we wanted to determine if city employees were adequately trained for their cash handling responsibilities. We used criteria from pretty standard professional and legal authorities for our audit. The American Institute of Certified Public Accountants puts out criteria for what are good and effective internal controls. We also use the Committee on Sponsoring Organizations of the Treadway Commission, which is an umbrella organization of 5 major audit and accounting organizations that promulgate internal control guidance. We also looked, because we are a government agency or a government institution, we looked at the United States General Accountability Office, which is the auditor for the federal government, and we looked at South Dakota codified laws. We had 9 findings and recommendations in these areas: policies and procedures, fund documentation, and we're talking about change in petty cash funds here, receipts, segregation of duties over cash handling, safeguards. We're talking about physical safeguards here as to how you secure cash checks and other instruments of monetary value, management oversight of the employees and their cash handling activities, and finally, training. And I might add that our audit findings and recommendations in this second cash handling audit very closely parallel those in the first. The first 2 recommendations out of the audit report did deal with policies and procedures. We recommended that the Finance Office develop some guidelines to assist city departments in developing effective written cash handling policies and procedures. The reason we tasked the Finance Office with this is because under South Dakota law, they are responsible for all financial activity in the city. Recommendation number 2, then these departments would take these guidelines, or in advance of them in some cases, and draft policies and procedures, making modifications as necessary for their individual situations. We wanted those policies and procedures to address all of the very basic and important aspects of cash handling, from collection to, as you'll see, all the way down to deposit reconciliation. Our third recommendation was, again, to the Finance Office to create, maintain, and complete an accurate list of all petty cash and change funds and have those properly supported by City Council resolutions, and have the resolution deal with those 4 items that you see there. And I'm happy to report the Finance Office has done that, brought it to you, you have considered and passed that. Fourth recommendation revolved around receipts. One of the very, very important internal controls is to have employees, when they are using either a system-generated receipting process, i.e. a point-of-sale electronic system, or handwritten receipts, and South Dakota law requires a 3-copy receipt if you're going to do something like that, that we need a process for employees and managers to review for missing, voided, or canceled receipts, because that is one sure way to perpetrate fraud, is to alter receipts or eliminate receipts. This was our major finding in both audits, was the lack of adequate segregation of duty around cash handling activities. So we recommended that where it is possible, and we do realize we have some resource issues around staffing that makes it difficult in some of the sites that we visited, but we do recommend segregating cash handling duties where you have the resources, and where you don't, put in some mitigating controls. And those 5 items there: collection and reconciliation of the cash, collection and depositing of the cash, and again, all the way down to the back end or reconciling the deposits to a remittance list, are needed to have an effective system of segregation of duties. 6 and 7, these 2 recommendations deal with the physical safeguarding of assets. We recommended that management properly safeguard cash using lock boxes and or safes where they are available, and that when staff receive checks, they restrictively endorse them immediately. There is no easier way to perpetrate fraud than to have a check cashed by a third party or a bank who is unaware that you should not be cashing that check. Recommendation 7 was that a particular recommendation to the utility maintenance facility, that when payments for tap fees are made, they be received and processed at that facility. We had situations of cash and checks moving back and forth several times between the utility maintenance facility and the finance office and back again. It doesn't make any sense from either an efficiency standpoint or an asset safeguarding standpoint. We recommended in the area of management oversight that department management develop some monitoring procedures over their cash handling activities to ensure that records are complete and accurate, and that the change funds they have are accurate, reasonable, and sufficient. And I thank our finance officer for requesting information from the departments on the levels of those change funds before she put that ordinance together for you. This was a significant area of weakness in the city, and what we basically told management was, you don't have to oversee activities on a daily basis, but there needs to be some deterrent, and you need to be out there on some kind of a periodic basis based on the volume of cash that you receive. And our final recommendation was that we did find a lack of initial and ongoing training for most employees in the city, and so we made a recommendation to have that training developed and provided. And again, finance office was the logical place for that development. With that, our report is obviously online, and I'll take any questions over this audit report that you might have.
Are there any questions from members of the council? Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Kelly, can you tell me, has there been any discussion at Compass Committee meetings about assigning financial impact to some of these projects? Has there been any discussion of that?
I believe there has been, and I believe that there will continue to be as we kind of look at what kind of audits are coming up down the road. The audits we're working on now may have some level of financial impact, and depending on the results of the audit, could be expenditures, could be savings. It will just depend on those outcomes.
Do you think it's possible that the Compass Committee could change possibly their bylaws to add that, to maybe require that, or suggest that a financial impact be assigned to the different projects or audits, if you will, depending on whatever word you want to assign to them, so that justification for the costs for the Compass Committee, we can sing the praises of what the Compass Committee does so that it can justify its costs. Now, a lot of the things that I saw and a lot of the things that I read sound good, but I think a lot of the things, in fact, the recommendations you could assign financial impacts to, and I would love to see that happen on future audits where you are able, it's extra work, but I know that this is a field that I've worked in Six Sigma, so I know that this is something that can be done, and I'm just hoping that the committee will discuss this seriously and talk more about it so that I don't have to talk about it. But I appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further comments? If not, is there a motion to accept the report? So moved by Brad and second by acknowledge. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next one's the, chairperson. You want to read? We have another audit report. Okay, thank you.
We'll get this one queued up for you. The second audit we have for you tonight, released again in December, was the airport car rental and parking contracts audit. I just want to again thank the audited agencies. Airport management was extremely helpful in this audit, as was the attorney's office. We had some audit work that involved some assistance from Wade and the attorney's office on this. This audit was requested actually by a member of the city council, and turned out to be an interesting and I think beneficial audit project. The purpose of this particular audit was to ensure that the Rapid City Regional Airport and the concessionaires that provide the parking and the rental car services at the airport are complying with the terms and conditions of what are termed lease and concession agreements. You can think of them as the contracts between the airport and these particular vendors. We again looked at 3 objectives in this audit. The first was to determine if the airport and the vendors are complying with the contract terms. Second was to determine if department practices and procedures for monitoring the contract performance by the vendors was adequate. And thirdly was to determine if there could be some improvements to that monitoring process. A little bit of background real quick for you. The Rapid City Regional Airport provides the parking and the rental car services out there to patrons through contracts with private companies. The parking services are provided by Standard Parking, which is headquartered in the Chicago area, and the car rental services are provided by 6 on-premise and 3 off-premise rental car companies. The big difference there is that the off-premise companies pick up patrons and take them back to their particular place of business to rent the cars. The others have sites right at the airport. Car rental companies and Standard Parking pay a use fee to the airport based on a percentage of, and what you can't see down there is gross revenue. Here's what it was in 2012. We conducted the audit in 2013, so these were that was the last year for which we had complete figures. The parking concessionaires or concessionaire paid $919,000 in use fees to the airport, and the rental car concessionaires collectively paid $1,900,000. Together, this accounts for almost 50%. It's right at 49% of the airport's $4 million operating budget. The criteria we used were requirements found in South Dakota statutes for these type of lease and concession agreements, the actual lease and concession agreements that were in effect at the time we did our audit, both rental car and parking. Again, the COSO internal control framework, that is a primary guidance for auditors doing this kind of work. And again, because we are a government organization, we use criteria from the U.S. General Accountability Office. We had 4 areas in which we had findings and recommendations. Those were the minimum annual guarantee, the credit card service fee, contract monitoring policies and procedures, and then the one I missed was our general overall finding, which I'll get up here in just a second. So these are our primary audit findings. The Rapid City Regional Airport, the car rental concessionaires, and Standard Parking are generally in compliance with the terms and conditions of the respective lease and concession agreements as we tested those sample of terms and requirements. We did find some minor issues with the credit card service fee that is charged to the airport by Standard Parking, and we found that, generally speaking, the policies and procedures that the airport staff use to monitor these contracts are at a level adequate to make sure that the performance by those particular contractors are living up to the terms of the agreement, both financial and otherwise. However, the policies and procedures that they use should be formalized and put in writing to follow good business practices. Briefly, the recommendations were that management should add an addendum to the current rental car lease and concession agreements that would require the annual minimum guarantee for the use fee to be reconciled at the end of the contract year. Right now, the lease and concession agreement requires a minimum annual payment every month. My interviews with both the rental car companies and airport management indicated that was never the intent, that they wanted the minimum annual guarantee of at least a certain amount of revenue for the year, but so the lease and concession agreements need to be tightened up in that area. And I might add that none of the contractors are paying less than the annual minimum guarantee, but there were a number of months, especially in January and February, where some of the monthly payments didn't meet the requirements. And so the airport is working with their board on that particular recommendation. Recommendations 2 and 3 centered around the credit card service fee. Management needs to add an addendum to the parking lot lease and concession agreement that would specifically authorize the payment of a monthly credit card service fee to the parking lot concessionaire. Right now, this is being done under an informal agreement done in 1991. So we need that memorialized in the agreements to give it legal validity. Recommendation 3, management should require the parking lot concessionaire to provide a monthly report of the parking lot revenue from the credit card sales. The reason for this recommendation is that the credit card service fee is based on a percentage of the revenue that is paid using a credit card. And if that information is not forthcoming in the monthly report to the airport, they have no way of verifying that they're being assessed the correct fee. I did not see in my testing that they were being charged over or under what the fee should be, but I had to do a lot of work to get those reports. So they'll put that into place through the airport board. And finally, management needs to establish written policies and procedures based on the current practices, which are more than adequate for contract compliance and monitoring. And so those are the recommendations and the findings from that audit report. And again, I'll stand for questions.
Okay. Richie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say to the staff of the Compass Committee and to especially the airport folks that got to see the report of this and the adoption of the recommendation and the working together that you folks tried to do with the airport and the staff at the airport taking those recommendations wholeheartedly and fully adopting them. And then the other thing that I've noticed too, as this program is getting more and more used to being out there with the staff in the city, and they're working with you and starting to reach that comfort level. It's not there yet. We've still got some bumps in the road, but I just want to applaud everybody that's been involved in this to get those bumps leveled out and to bring forward something of a very positive program. So that's all I've got. I'll yield the floor.
Thank you. I have no further speaker requests. There's a motion to acknowledge that it's been made. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item.
This item is the annual report fiscal year 2013, as presented by Dot Rasmussen and Chief Auditor Kellen Kelly, and I'd like to make a motion that we release this to the public.
Second.
And Kellen, are you prepared to do a presentation on this one, or you are?
We
okay.
are.
Please.
We'll get it up here in just a second. The Compass Internal Audit Committee, or Independent Audit Committee, is required by Rapid City Municipal Code 2.95.130 to provide an annual report to the City Council addressing several different areas, one of which is the audits that were completed in the preceding year, the major findings from those audits. The ordinance uses the term corrective action taken by management. I would like to change that term because not everything they do is necessarily corrective in nature. Some of it is moving us forward down the road and implementing better practices. And then 4 significant findings that have not been fully addressed yet by management. And I want to also add here before I go any further that the council will be getting a follow-up report for the original cash handling audit that will cover many of the things that are also in this annual report, and that was follow-up report was approved by the Compass Committee at its last meeting and will be coming to you for consideration hopefully at your second council meeting next month. A little bit of background: the 2013-2014 audit plan, which guided the work of the independent audit staff in 2013, was approved by the Compass Audit Committee in December of 2012 and then by the full City Council in January of 2013. And this basically set out the audits that we would work on for a 2-year period. The audits that were completed during the fiscal year, first was the citywide cash handling audit, which you've seen, and Colleen Schmidt, our chairman, made a brief presentation on several months ago. The citywide charge account audit program was completed August of 2013, and then the 2 audit reports that we just presented to you, the airport car rental and parking contracts and the citywide cash handling 2 audit. Significant audit findings in the citywide cash handling audits, both were very similar, and I just recently ran through those in the last report, so we'll skip through those for you. Citywide charge account audit found several issues with the operation of the charge account program. Again, we had some internal control weaknesses. There was a lack of a mechanism really in place to ensure that there were some minimum requirements put on the vendors that would allow us some control over the charge account. And then we found that the city does not issue an identification to all of its employees, making it a little hard for vendors to determine whether it's a city employee actually making a purchase. Some significant findings out of the airport car rental and parking contracts audit. Again, we went through those, just there they are for you, your information. And again, you were provided a hard copy of this before the meeting. Management actions, citywide cash handling audits. Many of our recommendations have already been implemented by department management, and you'll see that in the follow-up audit report that I'll release to you this week. The finance office is in the process of developing guidelines for written cash handling policies and procedures that the remaining departments can use to develop their policies and procedures. Some departments have already done that, and I've asked them to compare what they did to the guidance provided from the finance office when it arrives. Training on proper internal controls has not yet been provided, but I understand it's in development as well. Management actions for the citywide charge account program audit. Finance officer estimated in her response to the recommendations that they would be implemented sometime between October of 2014 and March of 2015. So we will implement the appropriate follow-up sometime in that time frame. And then the car rental and parking contracts audit that we just presented to you, airport management has agreed to implement all 5 of those audit recommendations. And when an appropriate time, usually 6 months, which is coming up in a couple months, we'll institute a follow-up and get you a report on what they've done to implement those recommendations. And again, you have a copy of our annual report in front of you. I'd be happy to take any questions.
There's a motion to acknowledge and second. Further discussion? Before I call a vote, I just want to visit briefly with this council that shortly after, I believe it was July, August, the mayor and I met, and I met with the departments and Colleen Schmidt and so forth, and we've had a very, I think, fruitful discussion with our new committee to just look at issues in the area of IT and equipment and fleet management and building maintenance and replacement and scheduling. I think we're going to see some very significant work, and we had some good input from our directors and our staff, and so I think we're going to see an even more fruitful year. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you, Colin. Dot, thank you. Our next item are the alcohol beverage license applications reissuances, items 68 through 166. I understand if there are no objections or petitions or requests to withdraw or speak on by the finance or police department, we'll handle these as one issue. Second. Those in favor say aye. Aye. So done. We do 168, that's great. Okay, so now we're going to open for public comments on items 168 through 169. Is anyone wishing to speak those? If not, move on. Item number 168, Legal and Finance Chair. He's out.
That's a consent item?
Yes.
Item 168, Karen Schumacher, doing business as Brass Rail Lounge, 624 St. Joseph Street, for a retail liquor license transfer to Karen Schumacher, doing business as Brass Rail Lounge, 624 St. Joseph Street. I move approval.
Second. Motion made and second. Any questions, discussion? Not those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 169. Oh, Richie, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Richie.
I get this one? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 169 is second reading ordinance 5989, an ordinance amending section 1706 of the chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by Sean Brinkman for a rezoning from medium density residential district, general commercial district, for property generally described as being located at 607 East Madison Street, and I move to approve.
Motion's been made to approve and second. Is any discussion? Those in favor say
Chairman,
aye.
Mr. Chairman, I just needed a clarification, and I'm not sure I got a whole total answer on having a sidewalk installed on that, and that is under building permit, on the north side of this property?
I think our.
That'll be
Public
taken
Works-
care of in rezoning then? That'll be taken care of when? The sidewalk on the north side of this property will be taken care of when?
When he goes to redevelop this property, which is a sales lot for his car lot, we'll ask for the necessary public improvements.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item is item 170, the bill list. Pauline?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have two additions to the bill list. First one is to Pennington Title Company for $2.8 million for the President's Plaza escrow account. The second is to Highmark Inc. for the settlement of $250,260.67, bringing the total to $8,598,717.79.
Move to approve.
Only 8 million? Only 8 million?
All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Before we take a motion to adjourn, I want to thank everybody for their prayers and support in the last couple of weeks, so, ciao. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Would anyone like to talk? Those in favor say aye. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you. Thank you for your evening.